Good afternoon. We're here with the Honorable Elaine Davis, retired from the Hudson County Judiciary. It's November 4th, and welcome, Your Honor. It's really a pleasure to see you.
It's always a pleasure to see you, Bob.
Thank you. I'm Robert Kavanaugh, Jr., the son of retired, deceased, Judge Robert F. Kavanaugh, Sr., and that's how I actually met Judge Davis, through the introduction of him and my mother. So, welcome, Judge. It's really, this is an honor for me, I have to say that. The purpose of what we're doing here today is with the Bar Association. We'd like to interview the retired judges and senior members of the bar because you have such a wealth of history and stories and what have you that we'd like to capture for the young members of the bar and the public for that matter. So with that, let me ask you this. How did tell us about your early career. How did you start? Where were you born? Things of that nature.
Well, I'm Jersey City born, of course, and went to local school, St. Paul's, St. Michael's. I went to Jersey City State, and then I went to UCLA for a master's degree, and then wound up at Seton Hall Law School. So it was an interesting journey.
Right. Now, how did you get into, you went to the Seton Hall Law, but now what was your first early career in practicing law?
Well, actually, I was a public defender, but that was my first law job, okay? And that was really almost by accident, because in law school, Dennis McGill, who was the deputy, was my criminal law professor. So sometime after that, he came into where we used to hang out, okay, in Arnold's, and sat with a group of us, and we were talking about working in the public defender's office. And I said to him, are there any jobs available for people that are in law school? He said, well, no, really. He said, we don't really take interns. And I was going at night because I couldn't afford, obviously, to be in the daytime. And he said, well, there is an investigator job. He said, but there's never been a woman. I said, well, maybe there should be. He said, you know what? Let's do it. So I made an application. He went down to Trenton to see the big guy and said, you know what, I think we should break this window and break this barrier, and that's how I got the job.
Wow.
So I went into the system earlier than normal, and I was an investigator, sat with all the big guys at the table in the trials, which was fabulous. I'll never forget, one of my most interesting experiences doing that was watching Eddie Zampella, who was, a premier defense attorney, turn a jury around like I've never seen in my life. So those were fabulous experiences. And then the last year, my assignment was in the juvenile court. And so I would go interview the juveniles, do the investigation, and then someone in their wisdom said, you know what, she's there every day. Why couldn't she at least represent these juveniles in a detention hearing? So that little buzz went down to Trenton, and guess what? That's what I did, and I was the first one. They do it pretty regularly now, but so I really got to be in the judicial, quote-unquote, legal experience very early in the game, which was kind of interesting.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, those judges in those days were very strict,
Right.
okay? One of them, who remained nameless, told me I should never wear pants in his courtroom.
That would not go over big today.
No, but you have to remember, at that time, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 women that were in criminal courts in Hudson County. And that's, you know, that's where I really got pretty lucky under those circumstances. Today, it would not be the same thing.
I'm sure that was a struggle too, being a woman in so-called the man's.
Well, you know,
the man's venue.
it was interesting because sometimes, well, I don't want to take war stories, I don't know if that's really valuable, but I will tell you what, and this was not Hudson County, this was Bergen County. And I went with, this was after I left the public defender's office and I was on my own. And I went with my client to the criminal court for case call, you know. So I'm sitting there and a very large judge who was on the bench, and I think he was the presiding judge, I'm really not even sure. He was calling everyone, and he called my client's name, and my client stood up, and I stood up as well, and he said, "I didn't call you, sit down."
Wow.
And I stood back up again and said, "Excuse me, Judge, I'm Mr. So-and-so's lawyer." Well, the poor man, I have to say, really had a real difficult time because he didn't know what to do at that point. So he just said, "Oh, and what was your name again?" So I told him, he said, "Oh, I'll be with you shortly." So it was pretty funny, but it was, you know, it was kind of typical in those days.
Right, that's a shame though, you know, that, but you know, hey, you broke the glass ceiling and,
Yeah.
And you've had truly a distinguished career.
Well,
And I can speak personally from having appeared before you.
so I spent 2 years as an attorney in the public defender's office. I always kind of laughed because I had been in the courtroom as I indicated, and I passed the bar. The news came out on Friday. They handed me a case file and said, "You're on trial Monday." I said, "Excuse me?" Well, you know, you've been in court, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So there I was, and I had a case with a young man who had stolen Pampers from a grocery store. And they caught him, he went out the back way, and they caught him with this stack, okay, of all of these Pampers. So I went to court that Monday morning, and the young man was there, and I told him that I was his lawyer, and he looked at me and said, "What?" He said, "Well, you know, would you rather have someone else?" I was ready to call anybody. No, you know, it's okay. So off we go into trial, and I said, "You know what? I'm gonna have to do something here to kind of liven up this." So in my opening statement, I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here this morning to decide the dirty diaper caper." The prosecutor jumped up. "I object, Your Honor." And I think it was Judge Dowden that said, "Sit down." And we went from there. I did win the case, by the way. But it was pretty funny. So that was the start of my legal career. And so I was with the office for approximately, it was maybe, I don't know, two and a half years. And then I did go on my own, and I was in private practice for 5 years in Journal Square,
Okay.
in the Jersey Journal building.
Oh, okay.
And I still did a lot of criminal work, but in order to survive and have a private practice all your own, you have to do other things. So I did some hateful things like divorces and closings and, you know, things like that, which I really didn't like very much, but you had to do it. There was no problem with that.
Roller
And
coaster
as a
ride.
woman lawyer, you got a lot of women divorce cases, you know.
Yes.
There really weren't any around, you know, and you'd get those 2 o'clock in the morning calls. He's coming in the door, you know. Please call the police, not me, please, you know. It was pretty awful.
Wow.
So then, interestingly enough, I get a call one day, and I was asked if I wanted to be an acting judge in the municipal court. Well, the first thing I said was, what does that mean? You act like a judge? I didn't even know what that meant. And they said, well, there's times that the judges cannot be there, or they take their vacations, or whatever, and we need subs. I mean, it's like the school system, you know, we need subs, but they have to be sworn-in judges.
Right.
So I said, well, okay, you know, that sounds all right. I thought it would be interesting to do that. So, sure enough, the Jersey City Council appointed me, and there I was. Well, at the
Who
time,
was the mayor at that time?
I'm sorry,
Do you recall who the mayor was at that time?
oh yeah, it was Tommy Smith,
Okay.
definitely, because the next part of the story really is involved with him. So, at the time, the judges were all very exhausted, including your father. And they needed to take vacations. So I worked a lot,
Okay.
you know. Instead of thinking maybe it was going to be 1 or 2 days, it, you know, very often turned out to be almost the whole week. Well, lo and behold, Judge Kavanaugh was not available on a certain Wednesday, and that was his housing court day. So I took over for him, and this horrendous case came in of a large multiple dwelling in I think it was Glenwood Avenue, but in that area of horrendous, just horrendous landlord abuse. Of, you know, the place was just a mess. I mean, the ceilings were falling down, the plumbing, etc. So I heard the case, and the attorneys were, you know, flying all over the place because they had really no way of dealing with a case like this, because we were talking thousands of dollars to be able to abate the situations. So I put it off for, you know, obviously you couldn't do it one day. So Judge Kavanaugh said, hey, listen, you want to stay with this case? I said, well, yeah, I'll stay with this case. So sure enough, we set it up where, you know, when I would come in for other things, or even just by myself, we continued the case. Well, the end of the case was maybe a year later, considering all of the postponements. I actually went to the building myself. That made the front page of the Jersey Journal, you know, watching and looking, and, you know, I mean, it was just horrendous. And wound up at the end fining the landlord, I believe it was $69,500. Well, it hit the newspaper. It went all the way down to Trenton, and turns out it was the highest fine that had ever been given to a landlord in the state of New Jersey.
Wow.
So, of course, here it was. Okay, it made the New York papers as well. At the same time, the mayor, Tommy Smith, had been interested in starting an actual housing court, a full-time housing court, because he had gotten a federal, you know, some kind of, yeah, I'm not sure that it was probably just a grant,
Right.
that's, as I'm thinking about it, to start the court. Well, when he was going to start the court, he said, where's that judge that gave him that fine? And so I became a full-time municipal court judge with the housing court, which was unique. I mean, now they're all over the state.
Right.
But we ran the first one,
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And I had this fabulous staff and I'll tell you, we did a great deal of work in trying to help as many of these tenants that had been just terribly treated. I mean, just terrible. I mean, they didn't pick up the garbage. The elevators were not fixed. I mean, it was just a nightmare. So I was in that job for, quite a bit of time. And we did make the New York Times. My one and only time with the New York Times. And then it became well known, okay, that the prosecutor's office was very interested in having a pre-trial court that we used to call PTC, which is now
I even forgot.
Right, which is now again all over the state of New Jersey.
Right.
But Hudson County was the first one. And Burl-Ives Humphreys, who just passed away, and he was the assignment judge at the time, asked me if I would do that court. And so that brought me then up to the courthouse. And my former prosecutor, Howard Cubley, took over the housing court.
Okay.
Right. And so I did the pretrial court again for quite some time. And it was very successful. And then, certain people had spoken to me, the possibility of going on to the Superior Court bench. Of course, I was delighted to even think about it, but it was a process. I mean, it's always a process.
Right.
And you not only have to, prove that you're eligible, to take such a job, but also that you pass muster with all of the powers that be. And that's not easy if you're just somebody like me. I mean, I wasn't giving any big donations to anybody or anything. So the process took, I'd say, less than a year. But in 1985, I did get a questionnaire. That was the
Yes.
first thing. So that was like maybe in February. I was very excited. I filled out everything. Little did I know that they were going to check every single thing. I got phone calls from an old neighbor who said, Elaine, there was a state trooper. It was very funny. So I guess I passed that. And then the next thing happens, they call you and say, well, okay, you have to go before the state bar. Well, this is another funny story because Harold Ruvold Sr., okay, was the president of the Hudson County Bar. And anybody who's watching this from the Hudson County Bar will certainly remember that.
He was a legend.
He was a legend, there's no question about it. And in that interim, I had been very involved with the Essex County Bar, who used to do a show every year called Bonton. Okay. And so when I went down for my interview, of course, Harold just, kind of walked me in, sat me down and said, oh, this is our terrific, I mean, he was not exactly being very democratic here. I mean, he was just trying to push me, to everybody. But anyway, the representative from Essex County said, "Oh, I remember you. You were in Bonton." Well, that was the conversation around the table, okay? And they said, "Oh, thank you so much for coming," and I walked out the door. So I figured, well, I guess I did all right, but nobody asked me too many questions other than Bonton. But it was kind of funny. And then I went to the same process with the Hudson County Bar. So now I have to go for my medical. Well, the first thing they do when you walk in the door with the doctor, he starts giving you numbers or words, say, 14, 18, 32, I said, well, what is that? He said, well, you gotta remember those. Well, I mean, the whole interview, all I was doing was sitting like, oh my God, I can't forget those numbers. Oh my God, I can't forget those numbers. And at the end, asked me for the numbers.
Right.
I guess that's to see if, well, number one, if I had a brain. Number two, if I could remember some. I mean, I still to this day, but it has happened many times after that because other people have told me. And you just sit there the whole time and you don't even know what else they ask you because that's all you're doing is thinking about those numbers. So at that point, I thought all was well. Well, that didn't happen because there was a change of regime in Jersey City. So Mayor McCann had already signed off on me, but a new mayor came in and, he certainly, at first, I don't think was really knowledgeable about what was happening with my appointment. Plus, I was being packaged with Ariel Rodriguez, who was a dear, dear friend of mine, and he was going to be the first Hispanic appointed in Hudson County. So that package, was pretty important for, the Democratic Party there, obviously. And so there was a little bit of a fight as to whether it was going to be approved. And then all of a sudden, things just sort of fell to the ground and then back up to the ceiling again. And I got a call. I mean, this is so funny when I think about it. I got a call from, I guess it was from the governor's office in Trenton on a Thursday afternoon in my chambers and said, please be available at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. The Star Ledger will be calling you. And I said, why? He said, oh, because you're going to be put through to the Senate on Friday morning. I said, oh, well, then thank you very much. And sure enough, 3 o'clock, the Star Ledger called, and that was the end of that. So I was sworn in on, I think it was December 3rd, and I got married on December 18th. So that December of 1985 was a big...
It was a good month for you.
A big one. So once I got on the court, I mean, it was wonderful. I mean, I had had the experience of already being a judge for 6 years.
Right.
On the municipal court, and especially with 2 special courts. So it was, it wasn't a big transition, let me put it that way. I mean, it was a lot I had to learn, but at least I had the sense of what it was to be on the bench, how to deal with the people in the court, how to deal with your staff, which of course is a very big deal.
Right.
And so all of that was already in place. So I really got very lucky in that regard. And I started out in the family court. And then, and then one day, Burl Ives Humphreys comes to see me, and I said, oh, this is trouble. I said, what did I do? Oh, no. He said, I just want to tell you that I am going to put you into special civil in September. The landlord-tenant thing is just very difficult. I said, well, okay, all right. He said, but I'm going to make you the presiding judge. I said, oh, well, that's okay. So I had 2 other judges. It's not that way anymore. And so we did it. And then I guess behaved well enough to be promoted to the criminal division, where I stayed the rest of my time.
Now, when did you go to the
Excuse me?
When did you go to the criminal division?
I'd have to think about that. I can't tell you the year. I really don't know. but I was in for maybe 2 years, and in that interim, Judge D'Italia became the assignment judge, and he made me the presiding judge of criminal, which I was until I retired.
Right, yeah, because I graduated Seton Hall in '89, and, you know, one of my first criminal appearances was before your arms. So that's...
Well, I probably gave you a bad time because of your father, but, you know. And so, I mean, it was an excellent experience. It was actually even better than I expected, because the Chief Justice, during that period of time, appointed me as the chair of the presiding judges of criminal for the state.
Oh, nice.
So I had that responsibility, but which also put me into judicial council. So I was on the judicial council for the last 6 years of my career. So I sat in Trenton, you know, with all the bigwigs, and, you know, represented the criminal division for the state at that, you know, those meetings. So it was, you know, a great experience. I mean, I was very honored to have been put into that position, and I always felt very grateful, you know, that I had not only that experience, but I also was able to make the contacts with all the people that were involved. Chief Justice Ports, in particular, was the one who actually appointed me twice to that job. And it was just a pleasure to sit at a table and watch that woman preside over, you know, that group. I mean, she was just marvelous, marvelous.
And being on the Hudson County criminal bench, you got to experience many of the defense and prosecutors that became legendary.
Well, that's very true. When I knew that Lenny Meyerson was coming to I said, oh, I better get the books out. Because there were no computers, okay?
Right.
Everything was in those books. And when I heard that Dennis McAlevey was going to be on, you know, I said, oh, okay, all right, now let's just calm everything down. And Peter Willis, of course, was popping in and out on various occasions, and I said, well, okay, we're going to have a great trial here. So, yes, every one of them came in at one time or another. Arthur Abrams and Marshall Wofsy were almost permanently assigned to me because I was the boss and said, I want those two because I know what they can do to, you know, get cases on the button.
I remember one of the last times I saw you on the bench, Arthur had brought in Izzy to do. It was shortly before Izzy ended up passing away, but he brought Izzy in to do a final arraignment for you, and I was in the courtroom that day on, you know, on my own matter.
Yes, and, I remember.
When they brought, that was truly a touching moment, I have to say.
Yes, it was.
And it was,
Izzy was remarkable.
Yes, yes, he was. So now, you know, when did you retire?
Well, I retired 3 times, actually.
I was going to say, because you went back on recall.
Yeah, right. So I retired, I think it was 2009, I think. And then I went on recall in Hudson for 3 years. And then I went on recall to Union for 3 years because I had moved to Scotch Plains, and it was going to be very difficult to get to Jersey City. And the one side of the Pulaski Skyway was closed. So I said, well, you know, I think I might, you know, and then all of a sudden I get a call from the assignment judge in Union. Oh, wouldn't you like to come here? So I went there, and they were wonderful to me, you know, even though I was, you know, a Hudson County judge, they couldn't have been nicer.
Now, were you on the criminal bench there too?
I was, no, there was no availability on recall for any criminal judges at that time, so I had to do family.
Oh, so you went back to
In
your
both places.
nightmare, right?
Yeah, and you know, I've said many times, I don't know what was harder than to put somebody into jail for 30 years or take somebody's child away, because that's what I did. I did termination cases, which was just awful.
And that has been tough.
So I really don't know which was harder. I mean, you know, when you would sentence a criminal defendant, very often you'd have one side of the courtroom with the family of the victim and the other side of the courtroom with the family of the accused. And it was really a nightmare because there was just no way that you could ever get everybody to understand the same thing. But you had to be very careful. I mean, we always had extra sheriff's officers because we didn't know what was going to happen. And there were some brutal cases, brutal. I mean, my mother used to say to me, I don't know, I thought you were going to be like this nice little quiet Catholic girl and never be able to see anything like that. I said, well, guess what? You know.
So what have you done with you? I know we saw you at the Bar Association Awards dinner the other night. It was really great to see you there.
Well, what I, you know, after I finished with recall, I decided that I was going to try to do, you know, a couple of different things. I did some teaching at Jersey City State.
Okay.
Yes, and I had a couple of classes there that were a lot of fun, and the students were wonderful. I mean, nobody was on their phone, which I thought was the best thing that could ever happen.
Yeah, that's, the phone has become like,
Yes.
their
So I
attachment.
did, you know, several different classes there. And I also stayed in the loop with the judiciary. Of course, I did go to the judicial college. And for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been what they call a judicial commissioner. And what that is that when a judge comes on the bench, they have 7 years before they get tenure. So halfway through, there is an evaluation that's done. They get a copy, everybody gets a copy, and the commissioner will go and speak to them at that point to see, you know, what help they may be able to give, any points that they want to be able to come up with, rather than have it done with their presiding judge, I guess. You know, it's like a neutral thing.
Mhm.
And then the same thing happens right before tenure. In fact, I just had one that's right before tenure, in which you basically do the same thing. And I suppose that one is looked at when the decision is made as to whether someone is going to have tenure. I don't know, to be honest with you, but in every case that I've had, everything has been excellent. You know, really no complaints. Because by the time it's 3.5 years, the new judge should, you know, pretty much know the situation. But interestingly enough, on 1 or 2 of those occasions, the judge did need a little bit of help in terms of how to manage certain kinds of things. I remember one was, you know, a very large indictment that had, I don't know, 20 defendants, and the judge was pretty put upon as to how to deal with that. And I remember explaining to her what I had done in a similar situation. I had 30-some, and I had made special arrangements to have them come on certain days, and blah, blah, blah. And she was very grateful, and, you know, for that suggestion. So that's the part of the judiciary that I'm still involved with. I'm also very involved with some charity work.
Okay.
I am a member of the Westfield Service League. I am on their grants committee. And we do, oh, and I also work in their, in their thrift shop. I mean, seriously, okay? There's a consignment shop and there's a thrift shop. And so I work there one day a week. And then the grants committee will be coming up soon, where I will be one of those that will go and talk to the people, interview the people really who have asked for grants.
Okay. Now, what does the Westfield Service League, like, what's its charge, so to speak?
Well, basically, it's totally nonprofit. The only people that get paid are the women that work, you know, the cash registers. And our charge is to give to as many charities as possible monies for their business, for them to be able to utilize, in an efficient way. I mean, we don't give anything to anybody that's just gonna blow it, that's for
Right.
sure, and that's why we interview and do it very carefully. But we're very involved with things like Catholic Charities, with several of the food banks, and also we do Meals on Wheels,
Okay.
and we do food pantries as well. So, I mean, it's a phenomenal organization. They raise a huge amount of money for this small house that we have, okay? I mean, it could be in the neighborhood of $200,000 or more. And we give it out, basically on need.
Right. And I know from, my own personal experience in government and what have you, Meals on Wheels and food pantries, they're becoming more and more in demand, in these times
I
and these
know.
days. And
It's very sad. I mean, when I worked at the food pantry, I see a woman that comes with their, 2 or 3 little kids. I mean, they will take anything you give them, and we have an enormous amount of stuff to give out because Union County really does a very good job in that respect. And so our pantry is filled with meat and all kinds of canned goods and whatever. And they're just so grateful, And it depends on how many kids will say, well, how many kids? I've had 3 kids. How old are they? Okay, so we make sure we, all the cereal and all the stuff that would be appropriate for that age group. It has made me feel very good, actually. It's one of the nicest things that I have done in my life. Because after sentencing all those criminals, okay, it was not an easy thing to be happy. However, I used to do the adoptions.
Okay.
And there was nothing better than that. To see people, the happiness in was remarkable.
I've represented 1 or 2 folks in adoption, and you do come out of there feeling like you've
Well, there were many
accomplished
tears.
Yes.
Many tears in the courtroom the day that we did adoptions.
Yeah.
Many.
Yeah.
So it was nice to do something.
Well, I truly appreciate you taking the time to do this, and it's always great to see you.
Well, thank you.
If you ever want to see the other interviews, just go on the Hudson County Bar Association website, and under the foundation, there's a whole list of, and now you'll be there also.
Well, let me just close by saying that the Hudson County Bar Association has been certainly a very important part of my life. I mean, when I first came in as an attorney, I went, was active in the bar, And they always, always encouraged me, because at that time, there were very few women, and I was always encouraged by members of the bar to do this, to do that. And certainly, they were, instrumental in my appointment, because, they certainly were happy that that was going to happen, despite the fact that, some of them may have wanted the job themselves.
Right.
And then some of them got the job.
Right. Well, it's established in 1877, and from what I've been told, we are the oldest bar association in the,
Well, it's
in the
quite
country.
possible. It's quite possible, 1877.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, okay, geography, okay, northern New Jersey was probably much more affiliated with things like lawyers and courts and whatever than maybe South Jersey was anyway.
Right.
Or any other county around it, any other state around us.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, I want to thank you for being my host.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.